Hello, hello, everybody. We are on the very last panel of the Winter Games. Wrapping up the Friday. Hard to believe it or not, but the official end of winter is tomorrow. We have the 11 table tennis finals tomorrow at 1. We got the Arizona Sunshine finals tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Mountain time. Check all those times on the website in case I got all of them. There's so many time zones here. We got Ragnarok finals that are going to be premiering soon. Groove Gunner, a bunch of stuff happening this weekend. If you're sticking around from this morning, thank you for hanging out from the Blast On with the Sea of Resolution Games and also Juan's panel. But today we have a pretty awesome panel. I came up with the title myself, and the team thought it was all right, so I'm proud of it. We're talking about Gun Fu and gun crafting with two of my all-time favorite VR games ever. And so these guys are making the magic. They're doing the game dev, the hard work to actually make this happen. We got Cameron Oltmann here from Cloudhead Games Pistol Whip team. And then we got Todd from The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners. So you guys are joining us here in Pacific time zone, so appreciate waking up early. That is, for anybody in gaming, that is a hard task. Pretty much the whole FAL team wakes up later, playing League of Legends, all this other stuff late. So we got that going on. So I'm just going to let you guys introduce yourselves, and then I have some questions for you guys. And then we may take some questions from the Twitch chat live here, depending how it goes. But thanks, guys, for joining this last panel. And then Cameron, if you want to go first and just say hello. You have a great background there. Blends very well. Lots of blues.
Thanks. Yeah, it's the Eiger, isn't it beautiful?
Mm-hmm. Yes, extremely.
Hi, yeah, Cameron Oltmann, gameplay lead on Pistol Whip at Cloudhead Games. And basically, if there's an element to the game that's about the player's sort of overall experience and what makes up the sort of moment to moment and overarching path that they go through, that's kind of my focus.
Very cool. And then Todd?
Yeah, so I was game director on Saints and Sinners, and basically means that I was kind of principally in charge of gameplay and systems for the title.
Okay, very cool. So I have a random question. Did you also work on Archangel as well?
I did only a teeny bit, but not really. Like I basically set up, like I'm an animator by trade. That was earlier in my career. So like I set up the initial foundation of like how the arms work, but it was only like a 2-week job, and then the other team took it from there.
Well, shout out to Archangel, because like that was like, we have a couple people that like still to this day are like, hey, Archangel, is it going to be a thing? Is it coming to like the Winter Summer Games, right? Which is so cool to see, because the time was groundbreaking, which kind of leads me into like my first question here. And I want to chat about like, what were your guys' very first, experiences in VR, and how did those lead into really influencing the design mechanics that came out later for Walking Dead and Saints and Pistol Whip? So, Ken, if you want to go first, just very first VR experience, and then how did that influence your later work on Pistol Whip?
Yeah, for sure. So my first VR experience, I grew up in like the 70s and 80s and stuff, and we were promised, like growing up, we were promised this like holodeck and virtual reality kind of mix of stuff, and
like the Jetsons plus Captain Picard. Yeah,
Jetsons, Picard, and then like Lawnmower Man, and like all kinds of crazy weirdness like that, right? And so my first actual hands-on experience with VR was I got a Vive, like July of the year that they launched and stuff, and I stuck this thing on my face, and I got I'd done my research and picked up all the like all the must-play experiences with it, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be really cool, and stuck it on my head and played things like Space Pirate Trainer and A10 and a bunch of all that stuff that was there at the time. And within like 2 or 3 days, I'm like, that's it, I have to quit my job, I have to make VR games.
Yeah.
And so yeah, 2 months later, here I was sitting by myself. I'm like, how do I? Oh God, that makes me sick, kind of stuff. And I launched this solo title that like that November, and that was basically what led to me being at Cloudhead, where I am now.
Very interesting. So you were a solo game dev for a little bit there too.
Yeah, for a little bit. Not profitable, not sustainable, not a wise choice, but fun.
Yeah, I mean, those early days of VR were pretty tough, right? Like Space Pirate Trainer was on something like 67% of all headsets, but there's a lot of groundbreaking stuff that happened in 2016, 2017.
Yeah, it was a super exciting time.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in VR, it's still super exciting, but it was like nobody knew anything pretty much, and you could make a really small thing and be relevant to the space at that point. It was really cool.
For sure. Yeah, there's some famous games that got their starts with just Reddit posts, like demos on Reddit. Like both Thrill the Fight and 11 Table Tennis both started as Reddit posts, essentially. Like, hey, I made this demo. Do you think guys could think it could be a game? And then it like blew up, right? So that's awesome to see. And so Todd, what was your very first like VR experience? How did that lead later into working for Skynets?
So, well, the very first thing I ever experienced was actually like in the 90s when I was a young lad. They had this like VR setup that they would take around to malls, and one came to a mall near me, and my older sister took me there, and I was able to do it. And it was super rudimentary. I don't know if you guys can remember this, but it was a real thing. And you stood, and there was like a cylinder around you, I guess, to keep you from like running off the edge or something. And you put the headset on, and then you had a gun, and you were able to like shoot things and do some like super early VR type of stuff. And then it just went away. I guess it wasn't profitable or whatever. And so I just I thought that was cool. I never thought about it again. And then like when I in my late 20s, then Oculus came out on Kickstarter, and there's this wacky guy in his garage building this headset,
and
I was like, hell yeah, I'll back this Kickstarter. So I backed it.
Man, you're original Kickstarter backer. That's like a badge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I got the DK1 headset. And it was sweet, I mean, obviously it was super early and the hardware was clunky, but I could immediately see it. Like I started developing just some prototypes for fun, just to kind of like see, what the hell you could do with this. So that was like that was my early introduction to VR.
Yeah. Which is great. This is not mainstream at all, but like there's some obscure facts from like the 90s in VR, right? So those
Virtual Boy.
Yeah, Virtual Boy, which I tried like Mario Tennis or something like that. I'm like at my cousin's house. I'm like, what is this? And it's like all red, and I'm like, okay.
It's just so funny because it's like it requires you to lay in the prone position to use. But I love that they did it. You know what I mean? It shows,
like so brave, right?
It was so brave to put something out there that did it, like really pushing boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think the machines you're chatting about are called the virtuality machines.
Yeah,
and somebody actually made like an homage to those games. It's called like Dactyl Nightmare, and you can go on the Rift store, and I think it's free. But like, if you ever feel like reliving that like 90s mall experience, and you just download Dactyl Nightmare and boot it up on the Oculus store.
Oh yeah, I think there was probably some relationship between those and the movie Lawnmower Man.
I think so. Yeah, there's like some promo tie-ins. They had
one had to inform the other,
For sure. But yeah, there was like a brief boom for VR in like the 90s, and then it like kind of went away, right? For a minute there, and so it was like hobbyists and stuff like that. So. I mean, that's all cool stuff to talk about, and we're grateful for VR now because it doesn't like make people sick as much. I remember when we ran our arcade, some guy was telling me that he tried the virtuality machines like back in the 90s. He thought it was like the most awesome thing, and he tried it with his brother. He immediately threw up, and then he wanted to try it again. So, but yeah, those are fun stuff. So, very cool. So, kind of leading that into my second question here, which is a little bit like game design-ish, right? So you got like a couple of new exciting things for both Pistol Whip and The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, right? And they're both pretty different games, but like on the Pistol Whip side, you have a new campaign called 28-9, which is the very first story mode ever, right? And then on The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, there's like this huge comic book universe to draw from for that. I guess respectively, like what did the story crafting modes look like creatively separately at the studios? So, I mean, whoever wants to tackle this first, but really interested to just, if we could be a fly on the wall to some of those early discussions around story stuff, what did that look like?
Oh, I got to hear this one.
Yeah, Todd, maybe we hear it first.
Yeah, I can go first. Well, I mean, this might be somewhat unsatisfying, but I actually was on a different project when the initial story stuff was being built. But from my understanding, it followed a pretty kind of normal story path. You get together with writers, you kind of start bashing it out, and we would work with Skybound, our partners, to kind of solidify a story. When I came in was like more when the game direction kind of shifted and we were going towards a more gameplay oriented thing. And I can talk about that a little bit. Sure. And yeah, the big challenges that we had was that we wanted to give the player a lot of freedom, like it's still early VR and we're kind of grappling with this. So it's like, okay, like, we have a lot of dialogue we want to do. We want to tell this nice story and have this Walking Dead, narrative that's awesome and that people want. But then in VR, you're there and you have your hands and you can grab your weapons and what do you do, right? So like we made the decision early on, maybe foolishly, that you could just kill anybody. Like we wouldn't limit the player at a time. Right?
Kill all the critical story characters, like in not killable like in Skyrim.
So it's like we want to have like this, this nice narrative, in the vein of the Walking Dead IP. But what happens when you can just stab somebody in the head real quick at any time in that narrative? So this created a nightmare for us.
Yeah, the story writers were like, uh-oh.
And so, yeah, we had to kind of develop mechanisms around it. So that's why like the radio is a central thing in the game because
that's your very first mission.
Yeah, so you can communicate and develop relationships with those characters via the radio because you can't kill the radio.
Oh, okay, makes sense. Yeah, the radio is unkillable.
Yeah,
people radio. Yeah, because you got Henry. He like dies like in the first like 5 minutes.
Yeah,
like hanging up there in the graveyard.
Well, he doesn't have to. He can come back as a zombie.
That's very true. Yeah,
if you don't kill him. But yeah, it created this vast web of branches we had to wrangle at the end, which was not an easy job. But it's cool. I like that we did that and just allowed people to just kill anybody at any time.
Yeah. Man, I'll come back to that later because I feel like the physics stuff and like some of the gameplay mechanics you probably worked on, right, were like super key. You probably had to make decisions early. So, well, Cameron, so like 2089, I played that, super dope. I was like, man, like, is this free? Is this for real? Right?
Yeah.
Like, because I played a ton of Pistol Whip for a minute there. I was like maybe top 100, top 150 in the world, like the first 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
But not anymore, and certainly not with the Quest players. So
yeah, I'm nowhere near.
Yeah. I know we got like some cracked like Anthony shout over is like probably really good on the Cloudhead game side, right?
Yeah.
But the story stuff is for everybody, right? You don't have to be like top of the leaderboard. And it was super exciting when that came out. What did that look like internally?
Yeah, so I mean, there's always been like in our heads, there's always been a bit of a narrative element to Pistol Whip. We just don't like throw it in your face, but it's there if you look for it. You could kind of like and we drew all of our we draw our narratives from like standard action movie tropes and paths, like stuff that everybody's going to be familiar with, right? So like there's a heist level and you like going into the vault and all this kind of stuff. There's stuff where like sabotage and there's like the classic like black magic, going through Chinatown and all that kind of stuff. And we saw the opportunity to do something where instead of each scene being, like each level being its own like standalone story, we're like, let's stretch it out a little bit each one will actually be a scene in a cohesive narrative. And 2089 was basically this, like what's one of the most sort of basically compelling, simple, satisfying action movie things we could do. And so we started with like, RoboCop butt kind of thing. And
yeah. Well, it is interesting because you got a story there. You got the metal, right?
Yeah.
But then you got like kind of a twist at the end. Like you got like a short spoiler, and I don't know. I mean, people probably spoiler after like 6 months. It's spoiler free.
Yeah.
We will mention anyway if anybody hasn't tried it out yet. But
it's cool, and it was a really interesting challenge for the narrative team to do this thing where like we have a thing where at no point in the game can you interrupt the player for stuff. We have little 5 to 10 second snips of things where we can show them or tell them just enough through the dialogue that they can kind of follow along with the narrative and let's support that with some environmental elements and whatnot, but that people can also just kind of ignore it and play through for the action if they want. And then their narrative guys did an awesome job on it.
Yeah. There's a lot of mechanics there. What kind of new mechanics did you develop for 2089?
So 2089, there were about 3 or 4 different things that were new there that we hit, like where we had to build systems and mechanics to support. I mean, first, every single pistol whip moment up till that point had been, like the pistol and you're either shooting somebody with it or clubbing someone with it.
Right.
We wanted to do something kind of futury and sci-fi feeling from a player empowerment perspective. So, that's where the burst gun comes from. But and we struggled a bunch with that. Like, there's a lot of us that like really love our shooters and whatnot. And there's a tendency in those for some, like there's a lot of standard conventions that people who play shooters are really used to, but we couldn't really do all of those things because part of the thing that Pistol Whip has been from the very beginning is this accessibility. You don't have to be.
Oh yeah, you can pick it up and figure it out in 2 minutes. Yeah,
that's always been the idea. And so we had all of these things where we're like, it's gonna be a smart gun, like like all like Cyberpunk or Shadowrun inspired kind of thing, and like Judge Dredd, like the double whammy, hot shot, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it also had to be dead simple and just like do what the player wanted at any given time. And so it's like, well, it's smart enough to know when it's actually aiming at someone, so it'll only shoot then. But you also don't want it to just randomly shoot extra bullets after the person dies. So, so there was a bunch of tuning to get it to the point where it just sort of felt like it would do what you wanted, and so you could understand what it was going to do no matter what you're doing. And it was a fun journey to go on there. And so that was the biggest thing, because that's what the player has from the beginning of scene 3 onward. They've got this weapon, and then it's just like them kind of, there's the power fantasy thing in scene 3, and then you get like a bit more of a challenge where you're like, oh, okay, it's actually getting a little harder now, and then scene 5 with the boss is of course
boss fight is pretty kick-ass.
Right.
That was a good surprise.
Can we do a boss in this game? We're like, sure, I don't know how, but I'm sure we can do something, right? We're also heavily inspired by light gun, like old classic light gun games, Time Crisis, Virtua Cop, like all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, what would we do with a boss fight? It's like, well, giant mecha monstrosity something, minigun fast bullet hose stuff is good, And so we came up with a new authoring system for how to make this unique class of enemy, and just kind of did whatever it needed, like built whatever systems it needed to be fun. And
yeah. So there is a boss system now in the game, like baked into the code.
Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. I'll try not to think too much on that.
No, but please do come to the Discord. Ask questions. We love questions. We may not be able to tell you a lot.
Yeah, you can't always.
But we love questions. Yeah, that's been one of the key things behind Pistol Whip too. Is anything we put in there is a system, right? Like there's a system behind it. We try to not do one-off anything if we can avoid it. And part of the reasoning behind that is the whole thing of like, the key to basically any game being good is iteration, and we try to just make it like, here's a system, and so people can just play with it to like explore 100 different paths to find something that's good. This is the designers I'm talking about, like find 100 different paths to a thing, and then like, oh, this is the direction that's fun. So we just make it as easy as possible for them to try new stuff.
Yeah, very cool. So talking about like gun crafting and just different weapons, melee, that's actually pretty good for one question I had here. So on The Walking Dead, they released the new mode called the Trial, right? Which is what we worked with BMF and some other YouTubers to do some like high score competitions around. And it's just super interesting, like that entire like balancing system. Because you got like almost the opposite on The Walking Dead, which is like so craftable, so customizable. The guns, like the shotgun, interacts like a real gun. It's really true to life in some of those ways. But in VR, that's really complex. And I'm sure at the time, like that was a brave decision because like Boneworks came out later, Half-Life Alyx came out, like there's this new genre of like physics-based games, and that's what people loved. Like that's why like The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners has so many positive reviews, is because it took such fidelity. Like, but I'm sure your coders were like, oh my gosh, like we have to do this. And like that's super hard to figure out. Todd, what did that look like, and what was your role in that?
So my role, I was like kind of directing that effort, and was, making, the decision early on to go that way.
Yeah.
Which proved to be extraordinarily difficult. So yeah,
Yeah.
I was deeply entwined in that effort, and I will say that it is incredibly difficult. Like I've been in games for 20 years, and I've built a lot of console games and that sort of thing. And this is easily the most difficult thing I ever did in my career.
Yeah. Did you think at some points it might not even like pay off? You're like, wow, we're putting so much effort into this. And
oh yeah, well, we had no idea it was even going to work out the gate. We're like, okay, we're going to have the hands be in physics all the time, and everybody, like, physics is like a black box. We use the Unreal Engine, in the Unreal Engine, it's like a fucking black box. Like you talk to coders, and coders are like it's like the plague. They want nothing to do with physics. You know what I mean? Because it's like this deep underlying infrastructure that like nobody can edit, and nobody knows how to edit. So you're just kind of like at its whim, and then there's like mass values and all these weird variables that you don't know what the fuck they do, and like I have like montages that I've cut together of all of our bugs that's just physics just exploding.
Oh, well, I mean, that's what happened to Cyberpunk, right? Is once you have a physics engine, it does things you can't predict.
Oh yeah, man, and like the type of shit that we were attempting to do with physics was just extraordinary. Like we have a grapple, like when the walkers grab you, like your arm's totally in physics, right? And then their arms are IK'd to you, and they're partially in physics. So you're in this like dual character IK'd physics state, and then you can also stab them in the head. In which case, like your physics hand is driving their physics on head. Also, they're attached to your arm. It just creates this like crazy clusterfucks of physics that it's extraordinary. But I mean, I do believe that's the future. But it's just super difficult, and it really requires a lot of attention to detail and a lot of like stick with itness to drive in there and understand why the physics are exploding.
Yeah, because you guys are at this point like game industry veterans, right? But like in 10 years, physics might be the base, right, for almost a lot of VR.
I think it will be. Yeah, for sure, especially in VR, because there's no other way to get that physical fidelity.
Yeah.
Then you're not going to animate it. Like, I mean, you'll have like in a lot of our, everybody says like, oh, Saints and Sinners is a physics-based game, and it is, but that's only one of many methods that we use to kind of achieve the same point. And like the higher level overarching point is that, in VR you have no physical resistance in real life, right? Like the whole thing is you have your controllers, you're waving them around. There is no physical resistance. So the challenge is, how do you simulate physical resistance in a way that players are going to understand it, right?
Yeah.
And what we use is something we call visual haptics, which is using visual tricks to kind of separate the in-game hand from my real hand to simulate weight and resistance. And in order to do that, we use a combination of physics and various other trickery. We have some cases where we're even kind of animating it. Like my background is in animation. And so like in certain cases, like stabbing a character, like I actually author an animation curve, which is like how that knife is going to go into the head.
Wow. Yeah. So you got to do the
simulate.
animation plus physics. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Which the physicality of it all is a good point. I guess at Val, we're like literally the virtual athletics league, and we're always a little bit more biased towards like fitness and other stuff like that. Right. So actually, I remember the first time I played the trial, I'm like, oh, this bow is super heavy, and like you got that sense, right? And I'm like, man, I'm getting tired like wielding this like nail bat, right? I guess if both of you guys want to just chat about that, maybe Cameron will start on your side. But like a lot of people using pistol whip for exercise or just like get up and get moving, whether casual or hardcore. Was that intentional, or was that just kind of like a surprise after effect?
I guess you could say it was kind of semi-intentional. We wanted, like, we knew from the beginning there were like a set of guiding pillars behind the creation of Pistol Whip right from the beginning, right? Like it was designed very intentionally. We had no idea what we would end up with, but we knew kind of a box we wanted it to live in. And we wanted something in addition to the stuff I talked about before about like, super accessible, that you just jump in and get it, like right away, and you can just play and you don't have to kind of like, it never feels like it's in your way. We had this thing where we wanted it to be an active, fun looking and feeling experience. And so we started to see the physical activity and sort of fitness potential and that direction pretty early in development. We leaned into it a bit where we could. The earliest variants, like the earliest stuff in Pistol Whip was, like we had shooting and dodging the enemy projectiles and stuff. And it was specifically to get more physical activity out of the player that we started adding, like the dodge and duck pillars and stuff like that, which are essentially that between that and dodging bullets is why people, the community call Pistol Whip at leg day. And,
a lot
of them.
The squat machine. Round out your balance. For your VR workouts.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So it wasn't, it wasn't exactly, like there from the beginning as a direct intent, but it was like, adjacent to, we wanted the player to be active, and then we leaned into that when we started to see it happen in early development.
For sure. And some of the very top players of Pistol Whip, like when we ran the Pistol Whip competition with Oculus, for the home online players, like they were super fit, right? Like they're turning on Deadeye. They got all the modifiers on. Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah. With Deadeye on, like if you do the settings right, like you can get quite the workout out of it, especially if you really lean into it. There's like with all sort of physical activity, all games really, like, the players will tend to optimize for like, maximal results from minimal effort. And you stack on the right modifiers and stuff, and even the minimal effort can be fairly involved.
For sure. Yeah. Players will optimize it however they can, but in Pistol Whip, you still got to do all those squats and shoot everything. So it's still super physical.
Yeah. It's pretty hard to do cage fight without getting a bit of a workout.
Yeah, absolutely. I know even on the big play, like there's a modifier called Scavenger, right? You could theoretically play that in gym.
Scavenger. I love Scavenger.
Did you work on the Scavenger mod on there? So, okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
I need to boot up Pistol Whip like in a huge gym or a warehouse hangar, and then like,
oh my God, right? Yeah.
If somebody hasn't already, do it safely. This is not an endorsement of that idea, but yeah. I guess Todd, that's a good question, because like some of the weapons are a little more physical than others, right? And I promised I'd ask this question. Like there is a spoon, right? And there's also a screwdriver. Can you talk about either of those?
Yeah. I mean, it was just one of those things where like I show up to work one day and then all of a sudden the spoon you can jab into a walker's head, and like
do what you got to do in the apocalypse, man.
I don't know who did it. I don't know how this happened, but I'm just like, sweet, let's put it in the game. Like, yeah. There's a lot of like goofy shit like that made it into the game, and it's just like, it's fun. Developers need to have fun. I think it's good. It gives the game a little more life to let that stuff go into the final product.
Well,
you can also take a lighter and poke it into somebody's head.
It's intense. BMF for this last thing, we had a ton of people going crazy with axe decapitations, right? Like we had like 30 people sending their videos for that. And then like, yeah, you know, like you got the antenna, basically anything could be a weapon almost. Zombie basketball. Was that intentional?
That happened later. It was just
Yeah.
like the confluence of, okay, we got decapitation working. When we got decapitation working, somebody's like, oh, I want to be able to pick up the head. So he goes and he makes it so you can pick up the head. And then another person's like, oh, you can pick up the head? I have this basketball hoop. I'll put 2 and 2 together, you know?
And you're sitting there in the dev on the street. This is some good shit right here. Zombie basketball.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you gotta like, it's great. Like if the team's having fun, if they, you know, are implementing this new shit, like great, like let's put it in there, you know?
Yeah. All righty. Well, that's good. Well, glad to know that you guys had fun developing it, you know, before it got released. So, I mean, but this is like, you guys had fairly long development cycles. I remember I was talking with Joe from Cloudhead, like very early on. She's like, I think you have something you're interested in. She sent me a message on LinkedIn. I'm like, okay, what is this? Right. Like, and you know, the time, like these were fairly big risks, I think, for the studio in some ways, you know, cause Cloudhead had the gallery, like Pistol Whip was very different from that. You know, I guess, and we'll maybe chat about two different moments. Like nobody knows the story of the secret behind the wedding proposal, right? In Pistol Whip that went viral recently. But like you basically went from like these like very like internal in-house game development discussions to like now there's like 4 million views on TikTok for like that wedding proposal thing, right? You know, what did that look like? And then I'm very curious because there's so many new people that are just discovering these games for the first time. I think I read that Walking Dead Saints and Sinners sold 10 times as much on the Quest platform as like some of the other PC stuff, which is that accurate? I think that was an upload VR, but the Quest sales were huge, right?
Yeah, they were big. I don't know the specifics, but that 10x seems a little high.
Yeah. Well, I'll search it, but I'll stop chatting for just a minute. If Cameron, if you want to chat, like, what did that look like to go from not very visible to hugely visible, and all the new users that are finding out about Pistol Whip for the first time?
Yeah, sure, as much as I can. So like we obviously had fair bit of visibility, like leading up to that. I mean, there was a point where nobody knew what a Pistol Whip was or anything like that, like, you know, like back before release, obviously. But we got really good adoption at pretty much out of the gate from launch, and you know, and continue to grow our player base, thanks largely due to, you know, things like our you know, wonderful community manager, stuff like that. But there was definitely a big uptick when Oculus pushed out, you know, the Quest 2 and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think a large part of that is that there are players, like people being brought into VR now that basically have never touched it before. And a lot of those people aren't really people you would think of as gamers initially, stuff like that. So there was definitely kind of a broadening of the audience that happened there. So that's been really cool to see. One of the things that we love in general, like as a studio and as individual developers and stuff, is seeing all of the different ways that people experience the game, and stuff like that proposal video is a really good example. You know, like you have a situation where like there's these stereotypical, it's like, oh, well, you know, it's a shooter, it's, you know, gun violence game kind of thing.
Oh,
you know,
she's so into that game.
I know, right? Yeah, you expect it to be, you know, like some guy there, oh yeah, boom, headshot kind of thing, right? Like that's the stereotype. But here she's loving the game, and her partner is the one who's, you know, who's all like romantic gesture and, you know, got the ring there and stuff, and it's just really sweet to see, and everything from that to seeing, like, you know, all of the variety of players and the way that they bring their experience to the game, and their sort of different personality they bring to it and stuff has been amazing the whole time.
because there's some cool stuff there. I mean, she's probably using that game for exercise, it looks like, right? But she's probably not playing CS:GO with her PC VR setup, you know, in the cave in the house, right? So that's really cool. And I think like even some of the scenes, like the Heartbreaker trilogy, you know, like have some of these like more feminine colors and things like that. But that speaks a lot to like the casual users and everybody. Like Avaldina, she's a mod in our Discord. You know, she really likes Pistol Whip. She's a top 10 player, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really cool to see, right? Just that like diversity and variety there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess Todd, like that was another brave decision, I think, on the team side, right? Like you had this like pretty heavy like physics engine, and then it's like PCVR, it's hardcore player base, and then it comes out in the Quest. And I remember like Nathy, like the YouTuber at the time, he was talking about it. He's like, I can't believe how good this looks on the Quest. And it's consistently sat there in the top 10. You know, but the Quest is so hard to develop for. Were you guys intimidated by developing for that platform? It's mobile chipsets. You know, what'd that look like?
Yeah. Well, the the hard part for us was that we did develop it out the gate to accommodate that.
Very nice.
So like that opportunity came up later, and then we had to like retrofit all of our, PC, wacky development and try to like crush it down to that platform. But it was good, and honestly, like I think we've shown, and other people have shown too, that you can make super compelling experiences with those technical limitations. Like you just got to be smart about it.
Yeah.
And I think what they're doing with the Quest is absolutely amazing. Like they're killing it.
Yeah, the numbers are just off the charts. Yeah.
Yeah, and you just got to use, like, from a development point of view, you got to use kind of tricks. You got to be a little tricky about how you build things and how you work things out, and what's on screen at a time. But I think you can make a totally awesome experience on the Quest. And I think that's been shown by multiple people. And I really think that the future of VR, definitely within the next 10 years or so, is going to be people developing for multiple SKUs, right? Like going all the way down to whatever the lowest end SKU is, all the way up to the highest end, and developing it so it can easily transition between the two. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't easy for us. Like it was a very painful process, just because we didn't do that out the gate. Like we didn't have that knowledge. So like we're like, okay, we're just gonna focus on PC, right?
Yeah.
And then we needed to port to PSVR. So like every time we had to take a new platform, it was like a new learning experience. But now
that's a lot of that time for a studio for sure.
Yeah. But it was good. But now moving forward, like we're just gonna have one platform where basically we can just dial it and be like, okay, is this on Android, or is this on PC, or whatever?
Yeah. Because I feel like probably we've reached a turning point in VR, right? Because in the 90s, you sort of had like a boom and bust, right? But it finally seems like, with Q4, like Quest numbers, Sony's, pushing out a new headset. You got Apple in a year or two, right? Like, it's probably VR is very much here to stay from like a home perspective, right? It's sort of, we figured out the magic there.
Yeah, so. I agree. I think that, I like, if you look at the trajectory of headsets, it's going up exponentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it still hasn't achieved mass market, and I think it'll get there. I think once we get glasses that can do it, that are like, not like something all encompassing you have to put on, it's going to be an explosion.
Yeah.
There's going to be a total revolution there. And VR headsets are like kind of the earlier version of that. But I think if you compare the two, like the VR experience, I don't think you can deny that is compelling.
Super
and that
compelling,
people want to do that, right? Like it's the exact opposite of a game on your phone, right? Where you just pass out, or I'm just touching my phone and doing this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I'm going back to life. Like it's an all-encompassing experience. Like you have to dedicate yourself to it. So like unlike TV, and these other mediums, like everybody's distracted by 50 million things. This is something that demands your attention. You know what I mean? Like you need to devote your attention to this. And I think the experience from what I've seen, the kind of emotional and visceral experience that can give people, is worthwhile and is something that people are going to want.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of getting the hardware to the point where it's cheap enough, it's easy enough, comfortable enough, but it's getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. Cause like, VR definitely has its like good use cases, right? Like, it's turned out to be way more social, a lot more fitness than people thought, from years back. But then like, you have, it does have that thing where like it commands your attention, right? Like you might play like a mobile game and you're like half paying attention. You're like, okay, I'm raiding this on Clash of Clans, like drop all the guys here, like I'm doing this in between like a break at work. Like that was definitely me like 3 or 4 years ago. Addicted to Clash of Clans, spent $80 microtransactions, not again. But when you zone into VR, like it takes your full attention, right? And we've seen some of that actually like translate into real life skills. So I know Code Whip, he's like the number one pistol whip player. Like he's a crazy like grinder for all those records. He told me that he like, he went to the real life shooting range and he'd actually did pretty decent, which is really interesting, right? It actually, VR has the capability to like train you to do things, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's a question. Todd or Cameron, have you guys gotten any better at like bows and arrows in real life or spoons? Todd, would you stick around for the apocalypse?
Yeah, I think whenever I wake in the night and I think somebody's breaking in, I grab a spoon.
No. Plausible deniability. I'm just getting ready for my oatmeal, officer.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I would say it taught me. I was never really a gun guy, before this, but then I had to learn a lot about guns. So I would say like now I kind of understand how guns work, the safeties, the reload mechanisms and stuff. So at least I have some understanding of how that works, even though I don't own a gun.
Yeah.
So maybe if the attacker comes in and drops the gun, maybe I could use it.
Yeah, you're like, I've casually picked up enough through Pistol Whip and Walking Dead that I can yeah, that's crazy. Well, so we have a pretty active Twitch chat. This is a notice for like the Twitch. This is your time. If you have any questions, like feel free to ask those, toss those in the chat. We'll probably ask just a few here in just like the last like 10 minutes or so. But like we had like one interesting point in chat too. And we chat a little bit about this. And this is like a worldwide experience, right? Like, if you guys, can chat about it, like you did this all during a pandemic, right? Like everybody went remote. Was that way more challenging to do the game mechanics? Cause like maybe if you're all in there and like the island, you can all try on a VR headset. You can be like, okay, this is how the mechanic works out. But like if you're trying something new, everybody's remote. Did that impact the game development there?
Well, I know for us it absolutely did. And yeah, the thing that you're talking about, where like when we would try out a new mechanic prior to in the before time, as they say, everybody would all kind of gather around, and somebody put on the headset, they'd play through it, and their outputs on, showing on the monitor, and they're ducking and dodging and shooting and stuff while they talk about how a thing feels, and then the headset gets passed around to somebody else and all that kind of thing, and obviously that's just not practical. And so we did struggle with that for a little bit, and we tried a couple of different things early on that were like enough to kind of get the job done, but not really ideal. Like people would just, record their playthroughs and stuff. And where we are now is actually pretty close from a what it delivers and how it feels standpoint to what we used to do in the office, which is we will all join a chat join a room in Discord, and we'll all stream. And so people, so we'll watch the other stream as people are doing it, and we get the same kind of experience. We can see the people ducking and dodging and bobbing and weaving, and they'll talk about what they're doing, and also record their playthroughs for analysis later and stuff. But we can get actually a really similar sort of experience there. So with thanks to all the technology we have to support ourselves, like if this had happened 10 years ago, it would have been a nightmare from maintaining communication and cohesiveness in a distributed environment
phone calls?
perspective. Oh, gross. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all in all, I think that we're at least as effective now as we were before. It was challenging to get there, and that, I mean, not the ideal. Not that there's a good time for a pandemic, but right. Not the ideal time really for that. It's like, we're going to do a thing in this game we've never done before. It's like, and everybody go home. Like, not the best timing, but
yeah, pack up your VR gear and go to your home and start developing here.
Yeah. Go and work around, and your kids are going to be at home and all of that, and good luck focusing. But no, and the whole team has been, awesome. Like there are challenges, obviously, but we've been really fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, and I know I've seen on like Twitter, like Denny post a few things about like meeting tools and stuff like that. It's still coming along, right? But probably in 10 years, those avatars and stuff will be much more realistic. Oculus is doing a lot probably to push that forward. So,
long distance social interaction, like not just in games, but in general, I would say that you're going to see a huge improvement in how all those things feel much sooner than 10 years. Within the next year or two, you're going to see some awesome stuff.
It seems like it, right? Because you got the HTC tracker that just came out, and other stuff like that, right? Like it's not even like a 10-year thing. Like this is being actively worked on by a lot of teams right now. Because I mean, it's not perfect right now. Like, the very first alt space, like avatars are kind of janky, not the best for meetings.
Yeah. Well, also like trying to read social cues through a screen, right? Like it's really hard. That's where you get at the problem of people talking over each other constantly, and
the added latency and all of that stuff. Yeah, it's tricky for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting how this pandemic like accelerated certain things. You know what I mean? It's like we all kind of saw this happening. We were like, maybe it's in the future. But then once it gets shut down, now it's like, oh, wait, no, it's right now.
Now we have to rely on things like Discord streaming and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Todd, how did the Skydance team handle that? Like, you got like kids, you have like pets, all your VR equipment's at home. What did that look like?
Well, so for us, like we were about to ship PSVR, which was like really hard because we had to take our PC game that we just built, nonchalantly, not worrying about this like lower end platform and running at frame rate with all their unique quirks. And so we had to translate it to PSVR, and about 3 to 4 weeks before we had to launch, that's when it hit. That's when it was like, oh, nobody can go to work anymore. We're all home. But to like the producers' credit, the producers that work with me, like literally they just immediately like, okay, everybody's getting their computer shipped to them, and we're working from home now. And we actually hit the date even still.
Yeah, that's impressive.
So it was pretty good for us. I mean, we were able to adapt pretty quickly, and it was also good because like we were coming out. There was like The Last of Us coming out like in February. Like there was all these big games coming out right around where we were coming out. We're like, oh fuck us,
Yeah, and then with all these big 2D titles, it's not fun.
And then it's like, we're just like this VR game and whatever,
Yeah.
But then the pandemic hit and like everything got delayed, and there was just this wide window for us. We're like, yes.
Delay, Cyberpunk delay, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Which, I guess, maybe that will lead to like the very last subject here. Well, maybe two, right? I guess we're just turning to the future, and I know like Cloudhead and Skydance have both like grown, like gotten bigger in studios. You got like PR approvals, and the internet remembers forever if you tease something, right? So I guess, just really curious on future projects, if you guys can say anything. But then, I just like a interesting question, like on a personal level, is there anything you guys are looking forward to? Because hopefully we're turning the grounds on like sort of like this coronavirus thing. Are you guys going to head back into the offices? Like this is almost an exciting subject. You're going to have like barbecues on the 4th of July. Going to meet up with all the Skydance and CloudHead people. Like what are you guys looking forward to?
Definitely looking forward to remembering what people are like.
How tall is Denny?
Oh yeah, like he's one Denny Unger in height. That's the standard height measurement at CloudHead.
I think so, exactly.
It's an Unger. It's measured in Denny Ungers. Yeah, DU, Denny units. No, but yeah, that's a good thing though. Like we have a bunch of new people. I don't know how tall a bunch of people are. I only know how they look on the screen. And it's, like people talk about, oh yeah, the most surprising thing was seeing how tall so-and-so was, right? Like, yeah, I don't know. Like there's all of these people and I only know their social cues through a screen for a bunch of the new ones, which is interesting. And then there's people where it's like, I've been working with people for years and haven't actually seen them in person since March of 2020. Right?
Yeah, it's crazy, a whole year.
And we're used to, like, we love our parties, not as like a like not the stuff that ends up on the news where like drunken, drug induced, blah blah blah, like not, but like we just to get together and just sort of celebrate like the existence of everything and how fortunate we are to be doing the stuff we are and so just lucky. And so like our Christmas parties in particular tend to be this thing where like everybody gets flown in from wherever they are, because we've always had like at least 2 or 3 kind of remote different provinces, different countries kind of thing, and everybody gets flown in and like that's the chance they get to actually be together and hang out and meet space, and we haven't had that in in the last year. And yeah, that's the thing that I personally am looking forward to the most, is being able to just kind of like, go out for dinner and a drink or two, maybe with a bunch of people, and just sort of, talk and do things unscripted, or, and those bigger gatherings where everybody's together. Like that's it. That's what it's all about for me.
That'll be awesome. Because making a game is such like an experience, right? Like it's so hardcore. There's some crunch time. You really work with these people all the time, right? I guess, Todd, you guys heading back to the office anytime? Is there any new people you have no idea their height on?
I estimate their height by how they appear in the Zoom chat, and then I judge them. No, I'm kidding.
They're high five for good trajectory on Zoom and stuff.
I mean, there's definitely communication lost via video chat. I think hopefully we'll get to like, Microsoft's new holographic shit, and then we'll be able to have a little more natural remote conversation. But, I think it's not like one's bad and one's good. Like I think what this period has shown us is that people can work from home.
Sure. Yeah.
And that, what I mean? There's a lot of benefits to not having to drive, whether
LA
an hour or 2 hours
a
day. You know what I mean? And there's cost of living and there's all these other things. And it's like, well, listen, like we've learned that people can actually really be effective remote. Like it's really not that much of a hindrance compared to the cost.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that this pandemic has advanced kind of whatever advancements were going to happen anyway. It's just put on a faster timetable. And so I think that's good. I think that's good for people's health, just generally, like now that we can recognize, okay, like people want to work from home, we can fly them in and then we can have a get together, there is no substitute for just getting together with human beings. That's always good. I miss that. I want to get back to that,
Yeah.
So I think moving forward, I think it'll be good to strike a balance between the two, where we're a little more flexible with people's schedules, and we're open to using video chat or whatever the hell holographic thing comes out that we can use to communicate and get work done, because it really doesn't hamper getting work done. Like the only thing that you kind of lose in being in an office is more kind of happenstance ideas, like sometimes people just randomly see each other and they come up with a cool idea
Yeah.
and it turns into a feature, what I mean? Where like, if you're on video chat, it's a lot more deliberate. Like you have to be
Yeah,
like,
you have to
okay,
structure it, timed, has
enter video chat with me now, and you send a
Yeah.
request. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
But all in all, like I think that'll be good moving forward. Moving forward to more of a hybrid model and kind of accepting work from home. I think people will be much healthier. I think it'll lead to things.
Yeah. So hopefully we get like Christmas parties, right? Everybody like all see each other, less traffic, like because it's a lot of pollution. That's a lot of like wear and tear in your car, all that stuff, right? And like Adam Bombardi, a few other people were saying I'm not going to miss traffic in the chat. Some people are like, I like my PJs. Probably everyone's cooking at home, right? Somebody said catered lunch on Friday will get me in the office. So this is clearly a subject we've all been thinking about, and it'll just be interesting how it plays out. So I guess we're going to wrap this up here in just another minute or two. I guess, can you say anything about like any new projects upcoming, or like where can people check you out? Like, either personally, if you do like the stuff like the Twitters, or like where can they find out more about Cloudhead, The Walking Dead? This will all be on YouTube later. So we put these up on there. So I guess, Cameron, kind of closing thoughts, like where can we find you? Any new projects, any of this stuff?
I'm personally on Twitter at CodeBison. But if you're interested in like what we might be doing next, or want to, keep up on, the current happenings at Cloudhead or with Pistol Whip or whatever, you want to join the Pistol Whip, join the Cloudhead Discord. There's a great community of people there to hang out with. You can find the links on the Cloudhead Games website and stuff like that, or, the Googles. Yeah. And as for, we are working on a new thing, but I can't talk about it.
Uh-oh. That's exciting.
There's more Pistol Whip coming.
Very good. Let's thinking back to the boss system that's in game. Once you built in the game, it's, you
can't have just one.
Yeah. You can't have just one, like Pringles. So,
anyway, good for you.
Yes, they are very good. And, it's good for me and my exercise. So thanks guys personally for keeping on working on Pistol Whip. I guess Todd, same question.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of a ghost on social media, so I don't think anybody's going to be able to find me there. But
probably good for your mental health. For Twitter's a little overwhelming sometimes, and Discord too.
Yeah, it's just not my jam. But I'm hard at work on the next thing, and I can't talk about it right now. But I'm 100% working on future looking stuff that we're working on at Skydance Interactive, and it's going to be fucking sweet.
That seems like a very good sentence. That seems like a promise. So yeah. And Cameron, are you going to say something there?
I just wanted to say, Todd, I love the challenges that you guys tackled with Walking Dead, Saints and Sinners and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And the solutions you guys came up with, and I'm super excited to see what you do with that next. That whole arena of stuff is absolutely fascinating to me, and I just can't wait.
I would like to respond to that and saying thank you. That means a lot to me. I think what you guys did was awesome, and I love just such a different approach than what we did, but so awesome in its own right. It was just like this poppy, visceral thing, like super arcadey fun. You just get right into it. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And hit me up, man. Hit me up on LinkedIn. We can collaborate on something.
Awesome. I will for sure do that.
Well, I super appreciate you guys like putting in the hard work, making the hard decisions, early on to do the physics stuff, to develop something groundbreaking and accessible, for the respective games. And hopefully, there's conferences or something like GDC, right? In person, Moscone Center. So that'll be dope. All right. Well, super good panel. Nerdy Nerd says digital bro hug. So that's awesome. And shout out to everybody in the Twitch chat for joining us here today. Digital bro hug. All right, here we go.
Bring it in.
Feels so good.
We'll try this in VR next. So
Yeah.
all right, gents. This was great. Thanks everybody for joining, and catch y'all later.
Awesome.
Thanks
a lot.
Thanks for having us.